Have you ever wondered, can you communicate directly with spirit guides, teachers, or non-physical consciousness, or even our higher selves? What would they tell us? My name is Kevin Moore, and since 2015, I started to practice a form of communication which is termed channeling. I have been interviewing experts on my talk show to find out, does life continue after we die, and can we communicate with those that have crossed over? With each expert I spoke to, they all had different ideas. Is there knowledge from the past which could be shared with the present moment? So I thought, why not just speak to the non-physical world directly through channelers around the world? And that's what I set out to do. They Call Us Channelers will take the viewers on a journey into the phenomena known as channeling. And my main goal with this docuseries is to bring a new understanding and awareness to channeling by looking within ourselves and asking, is it truly possible that we can all use this innate
My name is Nassim Haramein, and I'm best known for having written some alternative physics that have the possibility of unifying the fields. That is, the fields of physics, but as well the fields of many other disciplines with physics, like chemistry, biology, consciousness studies, even more esoteric field of knowledge, like more channeling and remote viewing and these kind of things can start to be explained in these physics that I've written.
Well, I'm just so grateful to be here with you. Just know that, right? This is a special interview, so thank you. And this will really help to open up people's minds in a different perspective as well.
Hopefully, I think at the base of it is a very age-old question. What is consciousness and how does it get there?
Growing up, were you always into science?
In my own way, I think in my own way I was. I was extremely observant. My father is a scholar. I was very interested in understanding psychology. My father was a child psychologist, and as well in understanding the source of reality, like how did we get here? What is this we're involved in, and what does it mean? Those questions were really prevalent for me really early on. And so in that sense, I think I was always very much interested in science.
And growing up, where did you grow up?
I grew up mostly in Canada, in Montreal. I was born in Switzerland. So every summer, or most of the summers, we would go back to Switzerland and Italy to visit with family. So I would spend my summers there, and then I would come back to Montreal for the winter, which was the harsh part of the year, but it was very important. It was very good because it really those cultures are very much apart at the time. Especially now, there's more mixing, but at the time it was very much apart, and so it gave me two very different point of view. Two different worldview.
It really did, didn't it? From that perspective, because you don't get that. The European side and the Canadian American side, it's so vastly different. Mind you, you could say the same for Asia, couldn't you? In a sense?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it really was good for me to see the differences, to experience the different cultures, and for me, Canada was really good because the natural beauty of Canada. Of course, Switzerland is beautiful as well. But there's a rawness natural beauty in Canada. And my involvement in the ski industry, my involvement in sports really flourished in that context. Yeah, so I'm an autodidact, so I'm self-taught. I've spent some 30 years studying advanced physics, mathematics, anthropology, archaeology, chemistry, quantum theory, and so on. So I've done a whole wide study of many, many different fields. And in doing so, because of my interest, because of trying to understand what is the base of reality, and now how did we get here, I think through that I start to see that there was some arbitrary walls, separation between different fields of investigation in science that needed to be removed, that needed to be merged in order to have appropriate, overview, global understanding of the forces of nature. And without removing these walls, then the information remained fragmented. And it was very difficult to have deep understanding and answer deep questions, even in physics, like what is mass, what is charge, what is electric field, what is consciousness, what is, all these questions remained really nebulous and in some cases completely unexplored.
So you never did a PhD, or you did do a PhD?
No, I've never done a PhD.
Yeah.
I like my degrees are in none of the fields that I've studied. I do not hold a degree in physics. Most physicists that interacts with me, and I interact with many, consider that I have at least 1 or 2 PhDs in physics in terms of my knowledge base, but officially I don't. Well, it's the result as well of extreme dedication and self-discipline that came because of a really deep interest, a self-motivated interest.
Where was that draw coming from? Where was the draw to want to know who you really are? What's looking behind your eyes? What is the I am?
Well, for me it was always strange when I was a kid that we all get here and, we get here and we're told this is what you got to do, this is how you got to be, that's how it all works, and then we just go on doing what we've been told to do. And very rarely in people's lives in general do we stop to ask, like, what is this? How did I get here? How come this world seemed to self-organize in complex systems like human beings and animals and plants and all this stuff that all works on a very, very delicate balance that is extremely complex, and that the result of it is that I can sit here and contemplate how is that possible? How did I get here? And so I just wasn't gonna go with the status quo. I just wasn't gonna go with the program. For me, it's like, stop everything. I want to know how this happened first. Then I can, maybe participate. But until then, I need to know.
Absolutely. And so I'm guessing did you start to creep onto the scene in the mid-90s? Was that when you sort of came out in a sense?
So in the early 80s, I had a series of moments of illumination, a series of moments of getting like chunks of starting to see kind of a possibility. It had to do with geometry. It had to do with structure. Already, I had spent significant amount of time in the sport industry, mostly in the ski and climbing industry, and I was really seeing that there was some fundamental geometric pattern that must be present at a very, very fundamental, like at a very fine level of creation. That must be the source of the self-organizing systems that we saw in nature everywhere. And so, and during those episodes, you know, I had, you could say, esoteric experiences that brought me to, you know, start to envision the world in a different way. I start to realize at a deeper level than before, because I already had that when I was a kid, but I start to realize that there's a hidden reality behind the things that we think of as our everyday life.
Was your life ever the same from that moment, in a sense?
It wasn't. I was never able to turn back and shut that off. I couldn't imagine doing so. I never looked back. It was not possible to like just go back to, you know, continuing to ignore that deeper reality that I had seen behind the veil, and I couldn't just ignore it.
Were the family quite open to the journey you were taking?
You know, I shared a little bit with my family, but yeah, it was a little bit tentative. You know, in my field at the time, I was a professional skier. There was not really many people I could talk about this kind of stuff with neither. So I kept it to myself for many, many years. And it's funny because at the end of my ski career, when I decided to move on to fully study and fully get immersed into this physics and mathematics that I studied, it coincided with a series of accidents, but one that in which I was hit by a snowmobile at high velocity while skiing, and you know, and hit my head pretty hard. So when I started to talk to my colleagues in the ski industry afterwards about the studying that I was doing, they all thought it was the result. Well, you know, there was a general thought that maybe it's because I hit my head too hard, but it was present prior to that.
But that probably was the catalyst, as well as many other things, to say, listen, this is not what you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. I felt like it was, you know, coinciding with like, okay, this is time to move on. You know, you've made your mark in the ski industry. You've made your point. You've proven to yourself that you can succeed. It's time to move on to something more serious, something more profound. And although, you know, dancing with gravity every day taught me a lot about gravity, about structure, about mechanics, and so on, that was actually useful in my investigation.
It was all part of it, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing journey.
And we never seem to do anything that doesn't help us some point in the future or somewhere along our life path.
Exactly. I mean, you know, that's a very important point. It suggests that there is some fundamental flow. There's some fundamental way that information organizes, that produces our, you know, our life, right? And our experiences, and you know, some might call it destiny. But what would that be? Destiny would be that there's you know, there's a way that information organizes to produce very specific results, to produce very specific evolution. And you know, it has a deep meaning if we apply it to physics, because in physics that would mean that you know, there's a predetermined information relationship in the structure of space, meaning space is organized in a certain way that is non-random. You know, it's not just throwing things at a whiteboard hoping that some will stick. You know, it's actually, it has a path. It has it's deterministic in certain ways. Now, if you ask me today, is the universe deterministic or non-deterministic? I will have to answer both. And just like if you ask me, was it a chicken or an egg, I will have to answer both. And what I mean by that is that I think there is a deterministic part to the universe, because in every instant, the synergetic effect of every instant produce the next event. But at the same time, I believe that overall there is a non-deterministic part, because it doesn't necessarily have an endpoint. It's open-ended.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So where you are now, I mean, just what we just did there, just to reflect back on the beginning part of the journey, where you are now, I'm guessing you're in a different place now. Has your research changed quite a bit when you look back over all the years, or has it just kept progressing and adding on to your original theories?
Right, that's a really good question. It's really interesting how it evolved, because it evolved from really deep questioning and really deep meditations on, and I mean that in a loose way, not necessarily sitting meditating, but contemplation about the nature of reality. And and in one case, 5-year isolation, where I studied almost 20 hours a day, slept very little, and so on, and actually bulk of my work that I've now mathematically described today was written during that period, that 5-year period. That is, it was written on logical deductions, on studied a correlation between fields of science and fields of investigations, and came to very specific conclusion. And I could say that today these conclusions are still there. Actually, they're more there today than they were then. But my path took me around this great loop where I eventually, got into very complex mathematics and physics to try to describe what I had come to. And it got very complex, but when it actually became simple again, when the solutions started to emerge in the mathematics, it brought me right back to where I was coming out of this isolation, this 5-year isolation that I subjected myself to.
I guess you needed that. I guess you did, to get to where you've got.
I needed the quiet, I needed to shut everything out from the outside and get really centered within myself. I climbed every day at sunrise and at sunset. That was my yoga meditation. I was I didn't have at the time, cell phones were not really present. I mean, there was the old large things, but that, and I didn't have computers. I just was, partly I didn't have computers. In the last 2 years I did, but, I had, this amazing, peaceful, quiet, no stress. I had very little funds. I had, but I was peaceful. Actually, some of the most joyful moments of my life, exalted moments of my life, I had in isolation. I talked to people very little, and so I was able to really tune in, and be in nature. I was in the mountains, I was in the high deserts, and be really, really attentive to all of the subtleties that are present that we typically miss in our day-to-day life because of all the things we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where we're at now, with your work as well, of course, there's the physicists out there, and there's the quantum physicists,
Right.
two kind of different realms. Where are we at with quantum physics nowadays, in a sense?
So currently, physics is in a bind. And I predicted that 10, 20 years ago with the event of string theory and other theories. There's a great need right now for new physics to emerge, and they are. And the new physics that are emerging are very much what I had come up with myself. Currently, this failure of string theory in producing a comprehensive theory of unified physics, and some of the failure of the experiments out there that were hoping to produce much more positive results. For instance, the failure in detecting dark matter and so on, are really putting physics in a state of crisis, and at the same time putting physics in the perfect place to transcend and really go to the next level. And so these moments are very important in the evolution of humanity. And they're similar moments that were present at the turn of the century, when Einstein and Bohr and Max Planck and others were writing their physics, which is really the last time that physics took a big step forward.
You've come up with a theory of, I suppose you can call it oneness, that everything is connected in a sense?
Yes. Well, I didn't come up with a theory of oneness. It's just that from observation early on, like looking at nature, you could see that there's a coordinated relationship between everything. Everything is reliant on everything else for everything to function. Like you remove some of these fundamental pieces in that reliance, and the system breaks down very quickly. So you have some kind of relationship. Like, the universe didn't make a bee on some other planet out there and made the flower on another planet, and the bee would never meet the flower. So, there's a relationship. It's not just the evolution of the individual structure or the individual strand that you are following. It's the evolution of all these biological structures in relationship to each other that produce the evolution. And so, to me, clearly there must have been some kind of unified system, unified field. And so eventually I realized that that must be the case. I started looking for it, and fairly quickly, actually, I realized that it had been found, but not acknowledged. And it's in the context of quantum field theory. It's called vacuum fluctuation, or it's called quantum vacuum fluctuation. In some cases, it's called zero-point energy. It describes space-time at the quantum level as a field of electromagnetic fluctuation that's present everywhere. And it's in the space. And since atoms are made out of 99.9999999% space, that is, all of our reality is mostly like denser space or charged space, where the space between is not in the same condition. What this is saying is that there's a field, electromagnetic field, the fluctuations of space-time at the granular level of quantum theory, that is everywhere and that connects everything. And so when I discovered that, then I started to think, okay, this is something that's being ignored. It's being ignored because the values are so large, meaning the energy that field has in it, predicted energy levels, are so high that most physicists shy away from it. They just say it's just incoherent, fluctuation. You don't have to worry about it. To me, it's like, wait, this could be the source of reality. It has enough energy in it, certainly, to do the job. So I started to investigate it. And eventually it led me to writing equations that demonstrated that, yes, the nuclei of an atom has within it enough information holographically to have all the information of all the other atoms in the universe within one atom holographically. And, it might sound outrageous as a statement, because that would mean that, all the energy of the universe is in the equation that you describe one atom with. It is. And by the time you complete the equation, which is a simple equation, in fact, you output a very, very precise radius for the nuclei of the atom, for the proton, and a mass, and for the electron, and all this. And this has now been proven to be more accurate than the standard model by a large margin. And it's, to this day, the most accurate theoretical prediction for these very fundamental values that we measure the material world with. So it's very important, and it says something very, very deep about our universe. And it says that every atom, the stuff you're made of, is actually constantly in communication with this fundamental field that connects all things, and that's how things self-organize. That is, the universe is entangled at all levels.
And how does that relate to consciousness? That's relatable to consciousness, though, isn't it?
It is. The remarkable thing is that it doesn't just output very fundamental values in physics, very precisely, both for quantum theory and relativity, that is, for all scales, which is a big problem in physics. There's a theory for the big stuff, there's a theory for the small stuff, and they don't agree. Well, this makes it agree. Like it brings gravity into the quantum world. But more profound for me, I think, it was already amazing that it did that, and it did so precisely. But even more profound was that it says something about biology, self-organizing systems, and consciousness. And basically what it says is that there's a flow of information from that field between the atomic structure and that field. So there's an exchange of information. This is what I calculated, basically, is the rate of exchange of that information gives the correct mass for all matter in the universe. That rate of exchange of information is transferred, right? There's some resolution loss, but it's transferred across scale. That's how atoms eventually organize into molecules, which eventually organize into biological cells, which eventually organize, to 100 trillion cells in your body, all doing the right thing, 1 million cell division a second, 1,000 billion chemical change every second. It's significant that you're existing right now, and that you can breathe, you can listen to all this. It's a remarkable thing. And what it says is that exchange of information, when it gets to enough complexity with the field, meaning that when the system can handle more and more complexity in its information because of the complexity of what it's building, eventually the system, because of the feedback, becomes self-aware. And so the field is feeding you enough information through the system that you can become aware that you is you, right? And so self-awareness, which is a definition of consciousness, is, emerged from the theory as a fundamental principle of creation.
And I've seen you on some other talk shows explain it as well, just these past few days, and it blew my mind.
Yes.
when you was describing it, right?
Well, we wrote a paper on it. It's my first paper in biophysics. I wrote it with Dr. Val Baker and William Brown. And, it's getting interesting and very good reviews. I mean, it's been cited by a very good team in Europe that are, so it's moving forward, and it's very exciting because if we can actually understand consciousness at the foundation of reality, at the foundation of physics, it leads to tremendous transformation of our technology and our understanding of ourselves and the universe, and it will change a lot of things.
Yeah, it's a big change, isn't it? You mentioned free energy, I think.
Exactly.
Before, yeah.
Extraction of massive amount of energy from the field, gravity control, wormholes, transfer of information across, huge distances.
I wonder how many others came to this same conclusion, because when you mention those words, I'm thinking Tesla.
Right. I think Tesla was hot on that trail. So were many others. Walter Russell is another one. Russell was thought to be a little more esoteric than Tesla, but still, Einstein was working on it. Not enough attention was placed on Einstein at the end of his life. He was working on this unified view of physics, but he had rejected some of the fundamental axioms of quantum mechanics at the time, and that made him unpopular. I think he was very, very close to solving. He was very close to solving what I solved, but he didn't have the tools. He would have solved it, no doubt, if he had the tools of modern physics today.
I was just going to say that it was such different times, wasn't it? Just
right.
Not how just people turned on each other in the sense when it came into this sort of esoteric a little bit, but just with the technology as well.
But even like Einstein's own theory had predicted singularity, had predicted black holes, but Einstein himself didn't necessarily believe that that was possible. So really, it's only been 30 years. I remember 25 years ago presenting in physics conference and talking about how black holes were ubiquitous everywhere, and that there was probably black holes at the center of galaxies, at all galaxies. And it was sacrilege to talk that way at the time. That was only 25 years ago. So you can imagine how difficult it must have been at the time for Einstein to even accept the concept of a black hole or wormholes. Wheeler, John Archibald Wheeler, did some really good work in that direction. At the end of his life, as a conclusion of all the work he did on black holes and wormholes and singularities, he came to very similar conclusions, started to talk about consciousness being part of this information flow across wormhole structures, network, and so on. Because he published this, he talked about it at the end of his life, in the later years of his life, he was in his 80s and so on, late 70s, 80s. The scientific community didn't pay much attention to what he was saying.
Sure.
So I think it's been there all along. Kind of the pieces are kind of coming together at this point. I think we're making the first step. And it leads to very, very remarkable things. We talked about some. It leads as well to what people talk about, artificial intelligence, very popular right now. I actually have a large issue with that concept. First of all, intelligence will never be artificial. That's a misnomer. If it's intelligent, it's not artificial. Because intelligence is not crushing data. You can crush data all you want. And that was the error of string theory. I think the premise of string theory were correct, but it got into such conceptual mathematics, just crushing data, that it lost, its tenets, its fundamental tenets of. So what makes intelligence, right? What makes an Einstein? It's much more than crushing data. It's a deep sense of communion. It's a deep sense of empathy, of connection, a listening to a certain level of intuition, a certain level of gut feelings.
Some people have called that a soul.
Yeah, I mean, so if we reach, I'm not saying we're never going to reach artificial intelligence. I'm just saying that when we reach it, the being we'll create will have intelligence as well, emotional intelligence.
I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but it just reminds me of when those that have talked about contact, and they talked about these Eben creatures, these extraterrestrial biological entities they're apparently built to travel in space, because apparently some have said to me that if you go past the certain radiation belts, that actually we will not make it into space. The body is not made for such travel,
right?
And we've not discovered that yet. The ideas of going to Mars actually may not be
feasible.
Be feasible, yeah.
Right. Well, it's not feasible with the technology of today. There's no doubt. Even just in terms of just straightforward calculation in terms of how many rockets we would have to ship, to maintain a community of 100 people on Mars, it's not even, it makes absolutely no sense. But I think that's all about to change.
You think so, yeah?
Oh yeah, I think that's all about to change very dramatically, because we are about to discover at a very profound level what gravity is for real, and how to interact with space-time to produce gravitational field, to control gravitational field, and that will be the next step in the evolution of humanity.
Do you think if consciousness is prevalent throughout the universe, about the the multiverse, however you want to look at it, right, that there may be some intelligent races that have made it past the point we haven't already?
Absolutely, I'm convinced of that. I'm sure. I mean, I was sure 25 years ago, when I would have arguments with physicists about the possibility of life on other planets, and I was told that other planetary system probably didn't exist much around stars out there, which, the logic for those conclusions was flawed as far as I could tell. And that there was not much water out there in the universe to produce other life forms. Since then, I think the last estimate, I think it was 2013, the last estimate for the number of planets in the habitable zone of their star in our galaxy alone was around 40 billion planets, right? That's only in our galaxy. And so even a small percentage of those planets had life on it. I just think that, and since then as well, we found that there's not really a place we can look at where there's no spectral lines of water. Water is everywhere. Even in between galaxies, we see spectral lines of water. So the probability that life is teeming in our universe is very, very high. And there's like millions of years, is nothing in our galaxy. Like, to do a spiral rotation above and below the equator of our galaxy, I think it's a 30 million year, cycle just to go up and back down to the equator. and then come around is another 30, so it's 60 million years. That's just one rotation. So imagine, there's probably planets out there that are way ahead of us. And just as for us, 150 years ago, we were on horse and buggy, and the idea that you could just go to Australia in some metal object, and like after a few hours, you'd be over there, was completely unconceivable. It's most likely, similar. There's probably civilization out there that go across the galaxy, not even thinking twice about it.
And do you feel they've maybe visited Earth? Do you think they've been here maybe, or are here?
Okay, that's the question. I mean, like to give an answer that wouldn't seem irrational, I would have to give a lot of data. Like, let me just state that I've done a lot of studies of ancient civilization and anthropology, and there's a lot of evidence in our history that there was direct contact at one point or another. And it's not a little bit of evidence. There's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of anomalies out there. And it's very, very convincing. And then in modern history, there is, thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases of people having had direct contact, people that are very credible. You're talking presidents, you're talking, military, high-level military personnel, and so on. So my opinion is that most likely, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's seeds of information, isn't it, that sometimes we're given. I think sometimes when someone's coming forward to give their truth, I think, there's a percentage of truth in there.
Right.
It may not be the complete truth.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you put all the pieces together, eventually you get a picture that, like, yeah, this is most likely there was contact at one point, and I could even go beyond that and say there is evidence that maybe some of the life on Earth was seeded there, and some people listening to this may say, "Oh my God, that's just crazy that he would say that. It's not rational." Well, some of the greatest geneticists in our history, Francis Crick, for instance, Nobel Prize winner for discovering the structure of DNA, wrote a paper, for instance, in 1973, putting forward the possibility from his own studies that life might have been implanted on Earth by an advanced race of extraterrestrials. This is one of the best geneticists on the planet, looking at the human genome, looking at what is found on this planet and saying, there's something amiss there. And what best explained what I've been studying is that there was, an intervention from an advanced race, of extraterrestrial that implanted life on this planet.
And I wonder if it was done from a consciousness perspective. Let's make some containers, because consciousness will find those containers and have an experience in it, and let's see what that experience is for them.
Exactly. I mean, imagine that you realize that we're all participating in a field of information, a field of consciousness, and that consciousness is creating all these complexities in the universe, in the galaxy, to increase the information network, to increase the complexity, to grow, to evolve. Well, if you realize that and you're a very advanced civilization, you might start, and you have capability to go to planets that are not yet at the level of complexity where consciousness can emerge yet. Maybe you would accelerate that. Maybe you would start doing a little genetic engineering, a little GMO, and like start to manipulate the genes a little bit. And I think that's what Crick came to, that the genes had been manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't buy the idea of a slave race, but I think I buy the idea of a benevolent, loving universe. I'm sure there is some negativity out there because you need opposites to have reality, but I think I feel more of a benevolent.
Well, the thing is that this feedback of information in the physics that I wrote is not like unlike some of the concepts you find in certain religious belief around the world that talks about, a wheel of karma, or, what you put out comes back, and, so that there's this feedback. When they describe it, they don't describe, people, if they talk about karma, they think negative karma, something you do bad, it comes back to you. But, there's actually, in these traditions, they don't necessarily assign a negative trend. The wheel of karma is fundamental to creation. That's how creation happened. And that's very similar to what I found in physics. So you can imagine, I actually don't believe in negative extraterrestrial out there destroying planets. And the reason why is that I believe that if you have a destructive nature, you will self-destruct long before you get past your little solar system. And so you won't have that much of an influence. I think the guys that made it past their solar system is because they learned some fundamental principles of nature. And these principles are principles of collaboration, co-supportive efforts, evolution, counter to destruction, and as well, civilization that have those capabilities don't necessarily have a need to invade anybody. If they can come across the universe, they don't really need things. There's enough planets out there. There's enough goods. There's enough, So they're most likely benevolent.
Thank you very much for that, and that's covered that subject there. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting back to consciousness as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, when someone talks about having a near-death experience, for example, or an out-of-body experience, but let's stick with a near-death experience, and they've gone to this place where they've got to meet their loved ones, perhaps like in the example of Eben Alexander, the neuroscientist that had a near-death experience where he's got to have information that he'd had a sister that he never knew about. He goes back into this reality. Yes, it's true, but where did that information come from?
Right.
What are we creating when we cross over, do you think, in regards to what we call the spirit world?
Well, I think what people describe as the spirit world is the coherent behavior of the information of a person after they've lost, the material structure that makes them. Meaning, so if you're exchanging information into that field, in physics there's a principle that no energy can be lost. So no information can be lost neither. So basically who you are cannot really go away. When we say a person dies, what do we mean by that? We actually, if you analyze what really has happened, is that there's been a decoherence, right, of the material that made the person, right? But not one atom has been lost, They're all there. They just change state. So what we observe is never death. What we observe is a change of state. Well, you can think of the change of state of the information that made the consciousness of that person as well. And so that probably remains in the field as coherent information. And I think that's what people call spirits.
That makes a lot of sense, because if someone is very religious, they may see Jesus Christ in a near-death experience, right? Mm-hmm. Or if then basically we create our reality. Mm-hmm. And that would be a reality creation that we're doing when we've even crossed over, maybe.
Well, people report commonly from their near-death experience that they met their family members, they met long-lost friends, and so on. It's conceivable that if somebody spent their whole life venerating a certain person, a certain being, that being might show up, that information in the field might show up at the time of transition, just because of the resonance connection, the resonance match that has been created between that person and that spirit, that information in the field. You know, I think, and so what I'm saying is that it's the information field that's the source of reality, not the other way around.
So who's creating this reality now? I mean, we've got a shared reality right now.
Right.
You mentioned before that well, it looks like we live in a holographic universe in a sense.
Right.
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 So who's creating what?
So the whole is creating the individual, and the individual is feeding information back to the whole. So it's a continuous feedback structure.
It feels like free will.
Right.
Is it the illusion of free will?
It is an illusion, yes. So that might shock people. There's this, meaning that, well, let me qualify. You can think of free will as your capability to decide what you're going to do next, all this stuff. But you can imagine that overall there's a evolutionary path, global evolutionary. There's a universal evolutionary path. It's going to a higher consciousness, higher level of complexity and evolution. And whether you like it or not, you're gonna go in that direction. That is, you have the free will to shoot yourself in the foot, but after shooting yourself in the foot 10 times, maybe you're gonna start thinking, maybe that's not the best way of moving, of being able to walk. So like eventually, I think, so on the gauge level, on the very close level, we have what appears to be free will. But I think ultimately, when we reach higher level of awareness and consciousness, I think we relinquish the concept of free will and adopt a concept of natural flow, of letting go.
So we're in this room right now, right?
Right.
And I can't see beyond that building. I don't know what's behind me.
Uh-huh.
But if I live in a holographic universe, is anything out there much except for what's here right now?
Right. Since it's all interacting, since all the protons that makes you have the information of all the other protons, you have access to what's beyond this building. You have access to what's behind you. If you choose to bring your awareness to that level of information, you have to be able to access the information. But if you can, then it starts to explain why people have capabilities that seem very unusual or esoteric, like remote viewing or remote influencing, remote healing, all these things where you have some kind of non-local effect. The non-local effect may be because everything is non-local, since everything is entangled and you're part of that, so you have access to it.
So if I said the words channeling to you, right, could we relate that to the same phenomena as channeling then?
Right. So when people, yes, we could. I mean, but there's a distinction, meaning that when we say channeling, typically we talk about somebody getting pieces of information that they shouldn't necessarily know about, and so how do they get there? Well, let's just take the principle from the start, and apply it to what the physics that I found. The physics that I found says that everything is channeling information, right? Continuously. And that's how things self-organize. And I just want to point out it's not just an esoteric concept. When you write the math for it, it gives the correct answer for very fundamental constants in physics and fundamental values in physics that are critical to our understanding of the world. So it's non-trivial, and they're confirmed in laboratory at this point. So I'm not talking just philosophically. So we're saying that atoms, what we call mass, what we call energy, is the result of information being exchanged between the outside, the field, and the inside, the volume. And it's going through a boundary, and as it exchanges across the boundary, that energy transfer is what we call mass. And it adds up just right with large number of accuracy. Now, if everything is channeling, then what is a person channeling, right? And what is a channeler? Well, a channeler might be somebody that opened the funnel a little wider than usual, that is tapped into the field at a deeper level than the average human being, the average person. Ultimately, I think everybody's channeling. They call it consciousness, right? It's just, I think, with a certain training, with a certain optic, with a certain amount of awareness, of empathy. Empathy, I mean empathy to the field. Like standing in front of a tree and feeling the tree. Like capacity to connect. I think a person can open the channel. And what would be such a difference between somebody channeling, I don't know, some entity or some information, or Einstein having a gut feeling, right? And thinking, oh, what about this? What about that? Or other scientists, most of the greatest discovery in science came from people when they're interviewed. How did you come up with this? Typically it's not like I was writing math and da. No, I had a gut feeling, I had an instinct, and then I wrote the math, and then I went and did the device, and then were they channeling? I mean, was Tesla channeling when he said, I saw the device in my head and I made it work in my head, and then I knew it was going to work? You can think of it that way. So I don't see that a huge huge separation between the concept of channeling and the foundation of what consciousness is.
I totally agree with what you've said there. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's like you say, it's almost like a download, isn't it, for some people? They just know. And isn't it amazing that the same idea comes to different people across the planet at the same time?
Right. Yeah, we see that all the time. And it's even amazing that, we have a bunch of different ways that we have been able to verify that that global changes in consciousness, that global behaviors, occur. Even in chemistry experiments, where when a new experiment is done, even if it's extremely difficult to do the first time, it gets easier and easier and easier. Even if it's across the world from it, all this, like, it really is. And then we have computers, random generators that show that when there's significant events on the planet or world meditation and so on, that they start outputting non-random functions, across nodes. Those experiment tells us, yeah, there is, a deep connection there. And so a channeler opens the funnel. We call them a channeler. Basically, they just increase their capacity to move information from the field, to access information from the field, and it could be from another entity. It still goes through their filters, meaning it's still subject to their interpretation. And that's where the inaccuracy can occur, where there can be some discrepancies.
I think that's always there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think percentage-wise, God, maybe 20%. Who knows? Maybe it's a low percent what's actually coming through.
Right, and exactly. So it might have been green on that side, and then it came out red on this side, and so accuracy might not be fully there, but there's enough accuracy, for instance, in remote viewing, right, where clinical studies that are done by very serious people in universities that were published in peer review, some of the most reputable peer review journals on the planet, show unequivocally that there is a large percentage of accuracy, and they're sampling from people that have no special talent, like just grabbing students in university and getting them to remote a place in Russia, right? And
it's so true, and it's so accurate, and if you speak to a remote viewer, they'll say, "Yeah, I'm channeling that. It's a form of channeling."
right.
I met a remote viewer just a few days ago in Colorado who's remote viewing his higher self now, remote viewing consciousness, and it was incredible the information that he's brought through from that.
Wow.
He calls it he's remote viewing the one, and I called the group that I'm channeling the one as well. So when we met, it was like, oh, hang on a minute, this is the same thing.
Right.
All the same source.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's all coming out of this, according to what I found, it's all coming out of this fundamental field.
But because we're almost at the end here now. But where does the idea of multiple, parallel universes come into this as well, in a sense, or does it?
Right. Okay. Parallel universe. It depends how you mean that. If you mean it very strictly technically, in terms of physics, it means one thing. If you mean it more loosely in concept of multiple universes, I'll just take it that way, because in the physics I would have to go down a rabbit hole. I think there's no doubt that there's no reason that our universe would end where we think it does. Meaning, we thought the solar system, we thought the planet was the only thing. Then we realized we were part of a solar system, and then we thought the solar system was the only thing, and then we realized we were part of a galaxy, and then we thought the galaxy was the only thing, and then we realized we were part of a cluster, and then a supercluster. There's billions of galaxies in a cluster, then superclusters, and now we think the universe is the only one. Most likely not, right? Most likely our universe is embedded in a larger one, which is embedded in a larger one, and so on. And the physics I wrote definitely supports that. And in fact, allows us to start making calculations that will tell us actually how many of our universes there is in the larger one, and so on. So I just don't think they're parallel.
No, I think I agree with you there. It's not what we think it is in that respect, is it?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. I think they're embedded within each other. Yeah.
And I wonder every day when we're making different choices, because I think we do, from your model, create our reality. We can create a reality. I think, and I wonder how.
But it's a shared reality.
A shared reality.
Yeah.
Yes.
So not every person is creating their own reality. Every person is participating in a common reality. Yes.
Right. Yes. And I wonder sometimes if as we were saying that if multiple realities do, multiple universes do exist, how many times our consciousness, and just call it that just for now, is shifting between those different realities as we're kind of making different choices or want to experience different things, and how would we know we've shifted over to another one? Because it's not the body that's going to shift, you know what I mean? It's something else that's going to shift.
Exactly. If everything is entangled, they're not. Everything is entangled in a non-local way. So when you move this finger over here, you might be affecting something on the other side of the universe, or in another universe that's embedded, that our universe is embedded in, and you have no idea, but you could become aware of it.
Yes.
If you're entangled with it, right? And I think there's moments that people might actually access that, and it could be completely like in some, random moment, right? And then all of a sudden, you have like a little moment of awareness of it. Like it's happened to me. I call it a glitch in the metric, and all of a sudden, I'm actually experiencing a different life, which I believe is somewhere else. And I might, and in those moments, I might confuse that life with this one, and then I realize, oh, this didn't happen here, you know. Yeah, I have maybe a little bit different optic. When I experience those moments, yeah, so they start to have. I start to have more and more glitches in the metric, and I started to pay attention, like really wanting to like pay attention. Okay, when there's a glitch, okay, what exactly am I experiencing? How is it? I start to like make a really big effort to remember because I would lose. I would when I would blink back, I would lose like the details of what I experienced. And so, I made an effort. And what I realized, and I can't certify this, but this is what I've come up with from my own experience, is that I'm actually not experiencing another reality of the same Earth. I'm experiencing an entangled relationship with a being in another world, on another planet, somewhere else in our universe or another universe, in which there's a moment of high entangled resonance match, and I'm experiencing their life, right? So I might be wrong about this, but I don't believe I'm experiencing this Earth in a parallel reality, but I'm experiencing literally someone else's reality from their perspective.
And I wonder what causes that match to take place. If that's the case, there must be. We talk about karmic matches sometimes,
right?
And that goes to the ufology thing sometimes, where this whole abduction thing is. What if you were more spiritually evolved to know that was a karmic match for you for that? That was your soul having an experience on Earth from another aspect.
Well, if you start to think about the entangled structure of the network, like all the protons entangled, and then all the structure entangled, and so on, you could start to think of like a flow, like going up the scales, right? Like if you're going up the scales of entanglement, you could start to think of like a trunk with like branches, right? So you could be like one branch over here, but you're part of this trunk, right? That is connected to all these other branches. So maybe in certain state, you actually access the trunk and then access another node of information, right? And then it's like, oh, I'm somewhere else. I'm experiencing something else. You're obviously not completely absorbed by it, because if you were, you literally disappear from here and appear over there. But maybe you're getting a little flow of information, of events that are occurring somewhere else in the universe.
Well, Nassim, I just want to say thank you for your time you've given me right now, which is well over what we were supposed to do, right? And just thank you for the work that you do as well, and the way that you've just explained everything.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to be able to talk about this. I've never done such extensive discussion about this in public. I think it's like the other people were saying, it's time. So thank you for the work you're doing in bringing this to the people. And let's continue to have this amazing discussion and grow together.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, man.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Guru Brahma